Welcome to the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly. I'm Tim Eaton, President of the Chicago Bar Association. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office is the second largest prosecutor's office in the nation, second only to Los Angeles County. The State's Attorney's Office employs nearly 860 attorneys and over 1,500 employees. This office prosecutes all misdemeanor and felony crimes committed in Cook County. Overseeing all of this is the Cook County State's Attorney, Anita Alvarez, and I'm delighted to welcome her as our guest. State's Attorney Alvarez was elected in 2008 and is the first female, the first Hispanic, and the first career prosecutor elected to this position. She is past president of the Chicago Bar Association and has been a prosecutor for over 22 years, trying herself more than 50 felony trials. Welcome, Anita.
Welcome, Tim. Thank you.
860 lawyers. Now, are all these lawyers prosecuting criminal cases, or do you have other responsibilities or divisions within the office?
We have other responsibilities. The bulk of what we do, obviously, is on the criminal side. And so we handle the felony cases, the misdemeanor cases that all occur here in Cook County, including traffic cases, DUI cases. We also have a juvenile division that handles the juvenile crimes. But the other part of the juvenile division that most people seem to forget is that while we have a delinquency aspect, the delinquency side of the juvenile division, the other side is abuse and neglect. So we handle those cases where there may be issues as to whether or not the parent is fit to continue to take care of that child. And where children have been physically abused in the home. So we handle half of the cases we handle there are on the abuse and neglect side. And then in addition to that, we have our Civil Bureau that a lot of people that don't realize rather, that it's there.
I'm sure many people don't realize that there's a civil division within the State's Attorney's Office.
Absolutely, because many other prosecutors across the country don't have that civil division. But we do, and we do everything in the civil division. We have, for example, our medical mal unit has the cases that occur over at Cook County Hospital, at Stroger Hospital. So if those doctors are being sued, our med mal unit in the office handles that. We have a tax, we have labor, we have torts. So everything is there, just like you would see in a law firm.
Yes.
Is handled over in our Civil Bureau.
Now, in terms of numbers, have you had to decrease the number of attorneys because of budget cuts or our trying economic times recently?
Absolutely. In fact, our budget since 2007 has steadily decreased. Even this year, but not to the extent where we had to lose personnel. But since 2007, we have lost over 100 positions for attorneys. Because at one point, we used to have about 950 attorneys, and that has steadily decreased. Now we're up to we're a little back up to about 860. And it's all budget cuts. It's just all budget cuts. And I understand the economics, and we're all going through bad times, and certainly the county as well. So as a result, our budget has been cut, and we've had to, unfortunately, lay off attorneys. Right now, though, based on what we see in our office and then the amount of people either choosing to retire or to resign and get a job someplace else, that seems to be increasing, which I think is a sign, a good sign,
yes,
that the economy is starting to turn around. Our wait list of people who want to come work for us is bigger than it should be. But we're very happy that we have consistently every year law students who want to come and work for our office.
And what type of impact has this had with 100 fewer attorneys, for example? How have you had to adjust the way things are handled with fewer people?
I think we feel the impact the most in our suburban districts. In many of our suburban districts, for example, misdemeanor court call is being handled by one assistant. It should never really be one assistant because the misdemeanor court calls are heavy. And when you have only one person there, then that person doesn't have much time to spend with the victims and the witnesses because he or she has to continue to do the next case. So we've actually experienced in our suburban districts, what we think is issues with having one assistant in those courtrooms, the misdemeanor courtrooms. So I believe that's where it's hurting. In our felony, our goal has always been to keep the felony rooms staffed, and we have. However, there are some felony some felony rooms that we only have 2 assistants. Normally, we have 3. So there are some rooms that we have to go low just because we don't have the bodies to fill them. So you kind of feel it across the board with the attorneys being down, because then that means our cases haven't stopped coming in. That means everybody else has to kind of do more.
You were a prosecutor for quite a while before you were elected. How did that help you when you took over the office after having been there 20 years? Was there something that gave you a leg up from others who may not have been involved in that office?
Well, I think it helped me because I really know how this office operates. I know what the attorneys go through, what the attorneys need, what works, what doesn't work. The benefit of being there that long when I was elected was I also saw the other side. I also saw what we traditionally would do and what was good and what was bad. What worked and what maybe should change, and what we should strive to be or strive to change. So I think in that respect, knowing the office as intimately as I did, it gave me the ability to make the changes that I thought were necessary to make the office run smoother.
And do you believe you've been able to do that now? You're in your second term, that you've been able to put your imprint on the office, if you will, in terms of running it the way you want to?
I believe I have. I mean, there are still some things that I think we need to tighten up, but overall, when I took over and started to look how we can be more consistent with how we handle cases in the city and how we handle cases in the suburbs. Sometimes you would hear from lawyers that, oh, well, if it's being handled in, for example, the Rolling Meadows Courthouse, it won't be the same as if it's handled at 26th in California. And we're one office, and we need to all be on the same page. And so one of the things I did in our felony review unit, which is that unit where the assistants go out to the police districts to review cases, to talk to witnesses, talk to the defendants who wish to speak to them, and work with the police on an investigation or to charge case. Traditionally, the suburban people would do the cases out in the suburbs, and the city people would do the cases in the city. What I thought was important is that every assistant get experience across the board. So suburban assistants working in the city and vice versa, city assistants going out to the suburbs. Because that way, all of them will be exposed to the different police departments. Obviously, the majority of cases come from Chicago for us, but we have 120 other little municipalities, and we have other police departments that we deal with. Some small, some big. So you have to know, sometimes those smaller departments are limited in what they can do, as opposed to what Chicago can do. So I think it was important that we all worked all over the entire county, and so that has worked well. Specifically also when it came to sex crimes, just to coordinate it better so that, again, the assistants are reporting to, whether they're out in the suburbs or whether they're in the city, that they're all on the same page in reviewing those cases and getting the assistance they need from our supervisor of that unit. So just better coordination, I think, has benefited us.
Now, since you've been state's attorney, we have a new mayor, we have a new police superintendent, and one issue that's always discussed is crime and whether or not we're making any progress in terms of addressing it. From your vantage point, are we?
I think we are making progress, and I think it's unfortunate that Chicago has this reputation nationally, that the media seems to put on the front page of every newspaper across the nation every time a gun is discharged.
It still happens. I mean, you read about it being the murder capital of the country.
Right, and it's not the murder capital of the country. And we're sitting now in 2013 at the end of the year, and the numbers are down from last year. And what I mean by that is the number of homicides are down 20% from the numbers last year, 2012. The overall numbers of shootings in 2013 are down 26% from the numbers in 2012. So we know that all the innovative programs and the efforts that have been put forth by Superintendent McCarthy, by the mayor, on the police department, that they are working. You know, it takes time for things to work, and nothing's going to be fixed overnight. But overall, I think we're seeing a decline. And the other thing I always note is that, sometimes I have to go out of town for meetings and such. When I'm in other cities, I was in Miami, I was in New York, I was in Washington, D.C. Every city I've been in the last 6 months, what do I see on the local news? A shooting. A shooting of a high school kid outside of school in Miami. I mean, it touches all of us, and it touches particularly every large urban area in this country, and not just Chicago. And so I think it's unfortunate that people want to portray us as being such a violent city. Sure, we have our issues, absolutely we do, but I think our issues are similar to Philadelphia, to other cities that are large urban areas that have the issues of gangs and drugs and poverty, and so we see what we see, but it's not, I think, portrayed correctly.
We can't seem to lose the Al Capone reputation.
Right.
After all these years. You touched upon gang violence. I know that's an issue that is very important to address. What have you been seeing in terms of any progress in addressing that specific issue in the last few years?
Right.
Both under your leadership and with the police department.
Right. What we've seen as far as the gangs, and obviously the gangs are an issue here in the city, absolutely, and not just the city, out in the suburbs as well.
Sure.
And we've seen them, what we're seeing now is that the gangs are factioning off. And so, 15 years ago, you really did have someone who was at the head of the gang, and maybe he had his generals, and then you had all your soldiers down here. Now what we're seeing is that although certain gang members will identify with a certain gang, there's also, there might be a 59th Street faction of this, and a 63rd Street faction of this, and a 55th Street. Yeah. So there's more we see infighting, as opposed to what we had seen 15 years ago. So that creates a problem because that creates more tension. And then for even, on the police side, how do the police know exactly who's in charge, and how does, because you have all these little factions. So that's different. The other thing that we see now is that the gangs are generational. So you've got, in some cases, a grandfather and a father and a son, all part of the same gang. And what we've seen, particularly with the older members, as they are branching out into other crimes, no longer standing on the corner just, pitching dope and dodging bullets. We've seen gang activity and gangs being involved in mortgage fraud cases. We've seen it most recently in human trafficking, in the sexual trafficking, where I think the gangs have discovered that, in their mind, that this crime is kind of under the radar, and they can make money off of it.
So they're becoming a little more sophisticated than just shooting at one another, for example.
Right. So they're figuring out ways to make money that not necessarily involves the typical gang structure. In the last human trafficking operation that we had, one of the things that we saw was gangs, gangs who were traditionally enemies, who would be traditionally fighting each other. We're now working together, kind of like business partners. And it was amazing. We didn't know we were going to see this, but we did. So you had a guy who was selling women to another gang, or they would share, or they would trade. And gangs that, like, again, would traditionally be fighting each other were working together as business partners, all making money off of the, sexual exploitation.
Much like the mafia used to be years ago. It's becoming much more organized.
Right.
Do you feel that the efforts of law enforcement has been hampered by the limitations to gun control? Because that's obviously happened in the last couple of years. Gun control ordinances have been challenged. Has that had an impact, do you think, in your ability to fight crime or gang violence?
Well, I think it's relatively easy, I think, to get a gun here in Chicago. And we look at other jurisdictions and at their laws to see, what can we do to make our laws better and to hold people accountable who are out there on the street with the illegal guns and who are the ones that are committing the crimes and doing the shooting. And when we did that, we discovered that, for example, in New York, their laws have traditionally been much better than ours as far as guns. So
now they have mandatory minimums, am I correct, in New York?
Well, they do. We have mandatory minimums as well. Theirs are higher than ours. So,
and has that had an impact?
It has had an impact. It has had an impact. And in fact, when I reached out to my counterparts in Brooklyn and Manhattan and the Bronx, what I learned from them was that they didn't see a change in the amount of gun crimes until the laws changed. And that's what we were attempting to do this past legislative session. And that was to try to hold people who are out there with an illegal gun, committing crimes, to hold them responsible and to really increase that sentence. What we were looking to do was to increase it to 3 years as opposed to the 1 year. So the mandatory now is 1 year. But we all know 1 year is not 1 year. One year turns into sometimes 40 days. And so our goal was to increase that to 3. Now, New York has increased theirs to 3.5, and they've seen a significant difference. Philadelphia has done the same thing. So I think there's room there for us to make sure we're being, tough on crime and holding the right people accountable for the crimes that are being committed.
I know that traditionally there's been this tension between downstate representatives and those who represent Chicago on this issue. Do you see that changing, or is it pretty much remain the same? Is there still, I guess those who support gun control are more from areas that are affected by it greater than the downstate representatives. Do you see any changes coming that way, or do you think this recent trend will be to have less controls and less restrictions?
This past legislative session, they passed the concealed carry.
Yes.
So, I'm waiting to see what the effect of that's going to be, here in Cook County. Now the concealed carry is going to be the law. What's important, I think, is that we have the right training and restrictions and background checks to make sure that if people are going to go out and get a gun, that they are going to be responsible and that they are going to be, someone who doesn't have a criminal history or even, a history of perhaps mental health issues. So all of those restrictions and have to be in place, I think, for this concealed carry to work. You're right in that, myself and then I think the other state's attorneys who are up here in the northern part of the state where we have the larger urban areas, our issues are different than perhaps my counterpart down in the southern part of the state. But I think, we all agree that the criminal needs to be held accountable and held responsible for what he does. So I'm hoping that we can continue to push forth our legislation. The mayor we did a whole big press conference, the mayor, myself, and the superintendent. We're all together on this issue to push forth this piece of legislation. Like I said, we weren't successful this time around, but we will continue to work on that to make sure that those people who are out there who are shooting the babies and shooting the 6-year-old, that they are going to be held responsible, because if they're in custody longer, I see it two different ways. You have someone who's serving their sentence, yes, but also as a deterrent, because I'm hoping that if this 16-year-old kid is out there and he sees someone go to jail for 3 years, that he will think twice before he picks up that gun and decides to do something. And I think it's important that the message get down to our young kids how dangerous this is, how this will affect your entire life. And, it's not the smart thing to do. And so we're looking, hopefully, at that these laws would be a deterrent. And I think the numbers in the other jurisdictions show that they are.
One of the issues that have been in the news is the overcrowding at the Cook County Jail. And I know one of the components of it, there's many, but there have been statistics that have shown a large number of people there are on drug offenses, and some more minor than others. What is your reaction to those statistics, and is that true? Is that a fair characterization that most of the people that are there are on drug-related charges? And do you see any changes that we could make to address that so that wasn't the case?
I don't believe those statistics are true. I think it's an unfair characterization. I think what the people who talk about that, and I've heard what you have heard, is that 80% of people in Cook County Jail are awaiting trial, and they're in there for a nonviolent crime.
It makes it sound like they have a little bit of marijuana and that they're
in
jail, at least from the stories that I've been reading.
Absolutely, and there are several things there. The people who are in Cook County Jail awaiting trial have already gone through their bond proceedings, and people forget about what the backgrounds of these offenders are. And you may have someone in there who just got picked up on possession of controlled substance case. However, he has 2 prior armed robberies in his background. He has 6 or 7 bond forfeiture warrants in his background, which is what, if you fail to appear on cases, a bond forfeiture warrant is issued. So those are things that a judge is looking at before they're setting
so the charge
bail
itself may be lesser, but the person could have a rap sheet that makes them dangerous to be out on the street.
A history of violence. The numbers there are astonishing as to how many people are in there right now who are awaiting. The cases are domestic violence related. So, when I hear those stats, I don't agree with them because I don't believe that it is true. When it comes to drug cases, we have done so much to divert people out of the system so that people who do need treatment are not going to jail, but they're getting the treatment that they need. Drug court is something that we've been operating for years. It works great. It's something that should be even expanded even more than what it is now.
So they can be diverted to programs where they can receive help as opposed to being behind bars.
Right. And those are the people who actually are the users. But many of the people who are in there for a drug offense are not users. They're the people who are delivering it. They're the people who are selling it. And many of those people who are selling it, they are not users at all. They're just simply making money selling the drug. So they may be in there for a drug offense. That doesn't mean they need treatment because they're basically the dealer. So, there's so much more complicated than that, than for people to talk in generalities and say you have to, let everyone out of jail because they might be in there for a drug offense.
Could there be more electronic monitoring which might cut down on the jail population, in your opinion?
In the electronic, when a bond is set, the judge hears from us exactly what we by statute are supposed to tell him or her. The nature of the case, what we expect the evidence to be, and the defendant's background. All of that is given to the judge so the judge can make their determination. I know pursuant to statute, the sheriff has the ability to let people out on EM. Again, the decision, we do what we have to do on our end to provide the information that is necessary to make a intelligent bond decision. I don't know if that answers all the problems. Let everybody out on EM. I don't believe it does. I think, we have public safety is my #1 job. And when you see and you talk to the victims and the witnesses in these cases, they want the offender to be off the street. They don't want that offender right back in their neighborhood over in the next night, continuing to do the crimes that he or she is doing. I think the average citizen here in Cook County who pays their taxes wants their taxes to go for public safety, which in essence is, making sure that the right people are being taken off the street who are creating this chaos. So
there's much more to the story.
Absolutely there is.
There's so many things more I could talk to you about as well. I know this time has just flown by because I know that you've had some initiatives in the area of domestic violence, in sex crimes against children.
Yes.
Can you, in maybe a nutshell, give us a little background on that?
Yes, domestic violence has always been a priority for me, and we've done some great things since I took over. And that one of the first things that I did was implement a 40-hour training program, which is a training program that domestic violence advocates traditionally take, but I made it mandatory for all of my assistants and investigators and victim witness personnel that work in domestic violence, because I think it's
Unfortunately,
important.
we're running out of time, but I think I could talk to you for hours with the knowledge you have about all this. Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez, thank you so much for being our guest on the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly. I'm Tim Eaton. Thank you for watching.